Dan, we're here at Oggcamp10 in the Blackie in Liverpool. It's 1st and 2nd of May. What's Oggcamp? Why are we here?
Why are we all here is a bit of a philosophical question. I'll leave that one for now. Oggcamp is a free software and open source technology conference. An unconference is basically a conference where the schedule is made at the event. So beforehand, we don't publish a big list of when people are going to be on and who's going to be speaking. We allow people to suggest talks and get involved on the day, and the schedule is made kind of dynamically, if you like, from user content and vote. Other people vote on what they like, what they want to see, and the popular ones obviously get priority. And we work it out that way. Yeah, and it's second one this year in Liverpool, as you said. The first one was in Wolverhampton, so we brought it back home this year, or I did anyway. And keeping with the Scouse stereotype going, I brought it home with me from Wolverhampton last year.
Free software. Free software. We were talking earlier on to talking to somebody, they're getting their laptop fitted with
Ubuntu.
Yeah. What's all this about? What's it all about?
Yeah, well, the confusing thing with I'm not a big fan of the term free software because I think it's really confusing. Because I don't know about you, when someone says free to me, I think of free as in money. Yeah. First of all, someone says, this is free, you go, oh great, I'll have one of those, it's free. You don't think it's liberated and free to do what it wants. But in the terms, the terms that we use, it means freedom. Excuse me. It means freedom, which so that there's a common saying in open source kind of circles, and people say free as in beer, which means no money, and free as in speech, which means freedom to do what you want. But basically, it comes from something back in the 80s. Richard Stallman started the Free Software Foundation, and he's still ahead of it now, and he created this license called the GPL, and the GPL has kind of enshrined in it what he calls the 4 freedoms. And the first one is the freedom to study the code of the software that you use. The second one is the freedom to modify the code of the software that you use to suit your own needs. Third one is to be able to run it for any purpose that you want to run it for. And the fourth one is that you have to contribute back any modifications that you make to the community. So it works the same way as copyright licensing, but it's actually called copyleft because it uses the same laws to enforce people to contribute back to the same to the software. So you end up with big companies using it, and little guy on the street can use it as well, and it kind of keeps the level playing field for everyone. That's the idea.
The whole idea of opening up the software on my machine and looking at the code would be quite frightening. As I'm sure it would be for many people. But is it easy enough to get into? Is it quite simple? Is it complicated?
Well, it depends. I mean, like anything else, there are more complicated bits and there are simpler bits. You could start off just by changing your desktop and moving your used interface around, which a lot of people do anyway. But you could move your toolbars how you want them, and change all the commands on the toolbars and stuff like that. And people would say that wasn't programming, but you're still modifying the software to suit your needs. And that can be fairly simple. Lots of people do that. But then on the other end of the scale, you might want to get really into the code and rewrite some. If you were that technical, you could do. So really, the great thing is, it's no matter how technical you are, you can get something for you. It may just be changing the colour of the background, or it may be, rewriting the whole new system. It depends what you want to do. So the idea is to try and encourage people to try something simple first, and then maybe work their way up. And the big thing most people can do if they do use free software is, or open source software, is bug tracking. Because one of the big problems we have is, obviously, lots of people looking through the code and stuff, and when you run your software at home, you get one of those little Windows type error boxes that says, there's been an error. Yeah. But rather than on Windows where you press that button and it says, would you like to send a report? Which basically doesn't go anywhere as far as I know. Doesn't seem to do anything. And everyone gives up on it, because after a while you send a few reports and you think, well, this isn't doing anything, so I might as well just forget about it, and you ignore it. But the problem we have with open source software is we want people to tell us when there's a problem, because it all gets logged and we can go through and make it better. So if you've got a problem with something, then if you tell us about it, we can fix it. That's the idea. So people can get involved that way. It's a really good way for non-technical people to get involved. They can just say, I ran this program, it didn't work, it did this, and then developers can then look at that and say, okay, why was it doing that? And then they can work out.
I mean, looking at the going back to the operating system, the Linux operating system. Now so you get the operating system, but then there are a whole lot of other packages which you can then fit on top of that.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of stuff.
So just quick tell us.
Yeah. Well, the Linux itself is what's known as a kernel, an operating system kernel, and what it does is it's like the core of the system. So all the basic low-level stuff like dealing with the hardware, all the data, kind of the housekeeping and stuff like that, is done by what's called the Linux kernel. And every system has a kernel, like Windows has a kernel, and it's Mac OS does as well. It's a kind of a staple of operating system design that you would have a kernel and then you use that as a foundation and build on top of it. So Linux is a completely free and open source kernel. And on top of that, what a lot of Linux distributions do, or distributors like Red Hat or people like that, who you may have heard of, big companies, they get the Linux kernel and they get the code and they work on the kernel and they contribute back to the kernel as well. They work on the kernel and they build a version of it, and then they put the tools that they need to do their job on top of it, and things like the interface, the GUI interface, all of the system modules, little things like the sound interface, stuff like that, all that kind of stuff they'll put onto it. And all that gets packaged up into Red Hat Linux, and you buy Red Hat Linux from them. It's confusing because people think Linux is that thing that you get out of the box, which is like Red Hat with everything in it. But really, technically, Linux is just the kernel, and they build on top of it, which is why they're called Linux distributions, because the distributors get all the pieces and get them together and then give them to you.